You may have heard of Johnson-Su Compost, but do you really know what makes it so revolutionary? It isn't just your typical compost. It's a biological powerhouse designed to supercharge your soil health, to improve your plant's resilience, and also to drastically cut input costs on your farm. So whether you're new to the idea or if you're looking for more information, checking it out, or looking to improve your Johnson-Su process, this video is for you. Now, regenerative ag is not just about reducing chemical inputs. It's about improving soil health. It's about adding carbon to our soils and making the biology in the soil healthy so that the plants growing in that soil can be more healthy, productive, and require fewer inputs, the way that nature does it. Welcome to Bioregenesis. We are on a mission to help regenerate and renew life and health on Earth. The life and health of everything from the soil to the soul. We draw from the wisdom of the ancient scriptures, particularly from the story of creation in Genesis. Guided by the principles demonstrated in nature, we explore ways to restore balance, resilience, and abundance in all we do. Our mission can be summarized in this statement: let there be life. Our guiding theory is this: nature will always win. Are you working with nature or against it? Join us as we uncover timeless truths, practical solutions, and a renewed vision for harmony between creation and stewardship. Subscribe now and be part of the movement. This method of composting and the BEAM method, biologically enhanced agricultural management method, that Dr. David Johnson and his wife developed with it, are designed in such a way that they make massive, massive impacts in a very short amount of time in your soil. So why does this work and why should we be using it? I'm going to answer that question with a question. Why do people in many parts of the world take down these rainforests and replace them with cropland? Why do they do that? The answer lies in the fact that those rainforests have developed incredibly healthy biology and they have mineralized a lot of nutrients in the soil. So when people remove those rainforests and replace it with ag land, that ag land is incredibly rich for a number of years, usually about 5 years or so, until that biology and all those nutrients are completely depleted by the conventional methods. Basically, it's like having a system where there's a bunch of cows in a field and the farmer says, I want some dinner. I want to throw a barbecue for my friends. And so he goes out and just slaughters his whole herd. Yes, he has food for the barbecue, but he has no herd to reproduce. So instead of using that method, which is very, very dysfunctional, this method takes the forest floor, the forest biology, and brings it to you. This method is designed to simulate a forest floor and develop that kind of biology, and then take that biology, put it on the soil, and then develop that type of environment that can foster that biology and build it up rather than depleting it. So that's my understanding of the basis for this method, and it works fantastically. The way it's done, originally, Dr. David Johnson has taught to use a pallet and then put a wire mesh cage on it, put landscape fabric inside the wire mesh cage, and then put tubes throughout the cage to develop these air columns for oxygen to get to all of those areas. Now, in the initial stage, the compost will heat up. I should mention here that you want to use really high carbon content. You don't want to use your usual carbon to nitrogen ratio that you would in conventional compost. You want to use a real high carbon content. Now, to do this, you can use old straw, old hay, dead leaves, wood chips. Just make sure that they're fairly finely ground up, especially wood chips. Those take some time to break down. If you have something with a waxy coating on it, like pine cones, pine needles, for instance, make sure those are shredded up really, really finely, or just avoid them because they take a long time for the microbes to consume them. Now, after the initial stage, when the compost gets hot, you introduce worms, and those worms work through the compost for the remainder of the time that it's being processed. During that time, which takes another 12 months or so, you want 12 to 14 months from the start of this process to the end of the process. During that time, you do not allow it to freeze or to dry out. You want to keep about 70 to 80% moisture in there. You don't want water running out the bottom, at least not very much at all. And when you take a handful of the material, you should be able to squeeze out a couple of drops of water out of that compost material. Now, you allow it to process for 12 to 14 months. At that time, the bacteria levels initially skyrocket, and the fungal levels are very, very low. However, over time, as things break down, the bacterial numbers drop off drastically, and the fungal numbers rise exponentially as they reproduce in there. It's very critical to develop it to the full year process. At that point, the numbers stabilize somewhat, and this is nature's gift to us. This is how nature would do it in a forest floor, with that ratio of numbers. So that ratio of fungus to bacteria is critical, and that is what makes the massive difference in the soil. It's because it's a stabilized community of microbes. So when we take those and apply them to the soil, it is incredibly beneficial. Now, there's different ways to actually build these bioreactors. Some people build them out of IBC tote skeletons, or the metal parts around there. Jay Young with Young Red Angus has videos on how to make those, and I'll include a link to Dr. David Johnson's videos and to Jay Young's videos in the footnotes down below. Now, I personally build them out of pallets. I like the pallets. I live in western Colorado in the high desert. It gets very hot, very dry here. Sometimes we have high winds, that are very hot winds, and they can really dry out the edges of the compost. So I like to use pallets. I have a pallet underneath and then 4 pallets on the sides to create a crate, but it still allows oxygen to get through the sides and into the middle through the air columns. Now, I personally actually make wire mesh tubes for my air columns so that they stay open, and I can move them around without being concerned about collapsing those air holes. And I like the pallets because they give a little bit of buffer to the edges of the compost bioreactor. So those are different ways that you can make them. I will have a video up after a while on how I make them. One thing to note, it is critical that that every part of the compost is within 12 inches of ambient airflow. So you don't want any part of the compost to be further away than 12 inches from your ambient airflow, whether that be an air column on the inside or the outside of the bioreactor. Now, let's take a look at some results of what farmers are finding when they implement this. Now, the BEAM method, the biologically enhanced agricultural management method, is a complete method, and I would highly recommend taking a look at that. It includes cover crops so that those cover crops are capturing carbon and nitrogen from the atmosphere and are pumping that into the soil and storing it up for future crops and to feed the microbes in the soil. That is very, very key. If you're using conventional farming methods and are trying to just get a cheap boost, Johnson-Su compost won't work for you because you'll be killing the biology as fast as you can put it out. You won't be developing a habitat or a food source for them, so it won't work. This is an integrated method, but the results are absolutely mind-boggling. I love hearing from Dr. David Johnson. He is such a beautiful soul, and the gift that he has given us in this is incredible. But when you watch his videos, it's almost like he's telling you what he had for dinner last night. He is so incredibly knowledgeable about this field that he doesn't even realize, he may realize the value he's adding, but he's not as excited about it as I am, for instance. He's so familiar with his work. So it can be a bit difficult to absorb everything that he's packing into those videos. So I've broken down some of the information from his videos. I've been using Johnson-Su for some of our farmer friends. We provide it to them, the extract, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But I've also been using it in landscapes, actually injecting it into drip systems for trees and shrubs, and the results are just phenomenal. It's mind-blowing how much those microbes do for a plant. So the biggest advantages to using this is it reduces input costs drastically, because now you're actually using what's in your soil and giving it to the plants. You're also introducing and fostering healthy microbes to sequester nitrogen and carbon from the atmosphere and give it to the plants. So that drastically reduces input costs. The other thing that it does is it gives you higher yields, because now your plants can basically reach peak health and peak productivity. It makes healthier soils and crops. We had talked about that. But by adding all that nitrogen, all that carbon, all that organic matter into the soil, it very, very, very rapidly improves your soil health. Because we're increasing organic matter in the soil as well, we increase water retention. So it prevents drought issues. It also prevents flooding issues because the soil has the capacity to hold exponentially more water. So let's look at some of the, well, first let's look at how we apply this. This stuff is so rich that we don't need hundreds or thousands of pounds per acre. We literally only require 2 to 3 pounds per acre of this. And because there are so many microbes and fungal spores in the compost, a little bit goes a very long way. So the best way to apply it is by actually taking the compost, liquefying it in what we call an extract machine, or you can do it in a bucket if you're doing small amounts, 55-gallon drum. There are a variety of ways to do that, and I'll try to post a video before too terribly long about different methods of extraction. There's also extract machines out on the market. We use one. An extract machine that I really, really like personally is the Hui-Chun, and you can contact me for information about that if you would like. So there's different methods of extracting it out there. Then you take the liquid and you can either apply it in furrow when you're planting, if you're equipped for that, or you can use it as a seed coating. And all those microbes get on that seed, and as soon as that seed emerges, those microbes create a symbiotic relationship with that plant. And the microbes go to work to bring in nutrients to the plant. The plant goes to work to bring in sugars and plant exudates to feed those microbes. They create this beautiful community of microbes and plants that are working together and supporting each other. The plant is basically pumping nutrients into the soil, energy, I should say, into the soil, and the microbes are going out and grabbing up building blocks in the form of nutrients and giving them back to the plant so that the plant can create its structure. The other way that you can use it is as a foliar. There are microbes in the compost that actually benefit the phyllosphere of the plant, not just the rhizosphere or the root structure of the plant. So that's another way that it can be used. The best way is to get it in the soil so that those microbes are protected. They have a house to live in, essentially, and they have a food source. Those are very critical components to getting those microbes introduced and beginning to proliferate within your soil. So let's see. Here are some results that have been seen. Dr. David Johnson has done extensive studies on this over the last number of years. So what they've seen in a project that they did in Turkey where they were growing cotton, they saw an 85% reduction in nitrogen application, 100% reduction in phosphorus and potassium fertilizers, and that's what we're seeing across the board. There is absolutely no reason to add more phosphorus and potassium because these microbes are actually going into the soil and unlocking them and bringing them in. Their results were 56% less insecticides on this cotton. By the way, cotton typically requires a lot of insecticides. They tend to be fairly unhealthy plants, and the insects really attack them. But with doing what they're doing here with the beam method and the Johnson-Su compost extract, they reduced their insecticide applications by 56%. They also reduced their tractor passes over these fields by implementing this method of basically no-till planting and all that. They reduced them from 22 passes a year to 4 passes per year. That decreased their diesel fuel usage by 61%. They also were able to apply 35% less water. Cotton takes a lot of water to grow. They were able to apply 35% less water than in their other plots. Over that time, they captured 14.37 tons of CO2 per hectare per year. Their soil nitrogen reserves increased by 239 kilograms per hectare per year. If I recall correctly, I didn't do the conversions. I believe that's 590 pounds per acre of nitrogen that they were sequestering from the atmosphere and tucking away into the soil for plants to use. That's why they can cut back their nitrogen applications by 85%. Imagine if you were paying 15% of what you're paying now on nitrogen in your farm, and you were paying 100% less on potassium and phosphorus. What would that do to your bottom line? That's mind-blowing to me. Now, their cover crops that they were implementing into this system were adding 10 tons of dry biomass per hectare every year. 10 tons of carbon and nitrogen, organic matter going into that soil per year. That is incredible. 53% more profitable than the other plots on this regenerative farm. And when they compared it to the national averages in Turkey, they were 77% more profitable than the national average. It was over $1,000 per hectare more profitable than their neighbors. That is incredible. Conventional yield on chili production, and this is down in New Mexico, as I understand, conventional yields are about 10.5 tons per acre. With the beam method that they were using and treating with Johnson-Su compost extract, they got 20.8 tons instead of 10.5. That's a 98% increase in production. That is absolutely incredible. Now, another thing that they've noticed, or that they've tracked, is when they looked at the soil profile and what was plant available. Now, mind you, this is in desert soil, virgin desert soil, and in this plot, they had never applied any fertilizer of any kind. They saw a 1,100% increase in manganese and iron availability. And I know from living in the high desert that it is very difficult to make iron and manganese, any of the metals really, plant available. They bind up so tight in our high pH soils. Dr. David Johnson said that their test plots had a pH of 8.2, which is about the highest that I see in our area. We're typically in the high 7s to low 8s. But a pH of 8.2, iron and manganese are not supposed to be very available at all. And yet they saw a 1,100% increase in availability. They saw 83% more magnesium available, 76% more calcium available, and 62% more zinc available, 40% more copper, and get this, 107% more nitrogen, 64% more phosphorus, and 37% more potassium. All became available without adding any of those into the soil, simply by unlocking what was already there and available. Now, they also have been able to increase soil organic matter very, very rapidly. And for that first 1% increase that they saw in their desert soils, they went from 10,000 gallon per acre holding capacity to 50,000 gallon per acre holding capacity. That's a massive, massive increase. 5 times the holding capacity. Imagine what you could do in your farm if you were able to hold 5 times more water than you do now. When drought hits and you don't have irrigation, that could be a lifesaver. That could be huge for you. And there are farmers who have had this happen. One farmer was using this, and I believe it was in 2015. There was a drought in his area. I could be wrong about the year. I'm just going from memory instead of my notes here. But the average around him in his county was, I believe, 9 bushels per acre for their corn. It was basically a bust. It wasn't worth combining. He still had, I believe it was around 100 bushels per acre that he was able to harvest. So his neighbors were coming and looking to him. What made the difference? And it was simply these practices, cover cropping and then treating with Johnson-Su compost extract. Another person who's using this is Corey Miller up in Montana. There again, he has a video. I'll include a link for his video. Dr. David Johnson mentioned him as well in the video that he has. So Corey Miller has some fantastic results with cereal rye. They planted it in the winter. They treated some of the seeds in furrow extract. Some of them they didn't. The stuff that was not treated, planted exactly the same day in the same field, was 8 to 10 inches tall the next spring. The stuff that was treated, 4.5 to 5 feet tall. Massive, massive difference. Jay Young with Young Red Angus, which I mentioned before, he did some experiments where he applied no phosphorus and no nitrogen. He didn't apply anything to his corn, but he treated the seeds with Johnson-Su compost, and he was still able to get 200 bushel per acre corn. Now, what he found is that his best combination came when he applied half as much nitrogen as was recommended by his agronomist and no phosphorus at all. He's completely gone away from phosphorus. And with doing that, he was able to increase his yields over what they did with their conventional methods of, I believe it was 180 pounds per acre of nitrogen and 80 pounds per acre of phosphorus. So by cutting out phosphorus completely and cutting their nitrogen application in half, they were able to actually increase their yields. To me, that's incredible. In 1 year's time, he saved $173,000 just in nitrogen. That is mind-blowing to me. This is able to be done on a very large scale as well. The Haggertys over in Australia, I don't know if there's a video for them, but they do it on a very, very large farm, 50,000 acres. That's 78 square miles. That's mind-blowing to me. But they've been doing it, and what they've seen in their barley is that they're getting 3 tons per hectare of barley. The average around them for conventional farmers is actually 1.5 to 1.6 tons per hectare. They're doubling their crops. Now, the method that they're using is seed coating and injection in furrow, and then they come back and do a third application as a foliar when the barley is about 6 to 8 inches tall. What they also noticed is that native grasses that had not been seen in the area for 40 years began coming back. They began showing up in where they put that Johnson-Su extract in furrow. That is really, really cool. And it's also very exciting because that tells me that we're regenerating soils, getting them back to what they were like before we degenerated them so far. So I hope this has been a helpful video. If you have any questions, reach out. I would love to see you use this method in your ag practice, save a ton of money, maybe save the farm. I've heard stories of that people are literally saving the farm now because they can afford to keep farming, and their profit margins have gone from razor thin or maybe even inverted to actually being very profitable. And it's so exciting to see. The other thing is that this is producing much, much more nutrient-dense food for the animals that eat it, for the humans that eat it, for the humans that eat the animals. This is a win-win-win, and it's all because we're working with nature instead of against it. So my question to you is, are you working with nature or against it? That's a sobering question, because nature will always win. I will guarantee you that. Nature is an expression of God, and God cannot lose. So which side are you on there? You know, let's take a good hard look at it and do the best we can. We can't begin to understand the complexity and the intelligence that's in nature, but we can make that shift. This wave of regenerative farming and of using completely different farming practices is hitting. Are you going to catch that wave and ride it out? Or are you going to be stuck, left behind with your conventional tillage equipment, with your conventional methods going downhill? I hope not. I hope not. I hope you catch on here and are able to ride this wave. It's not just a fashion thing. I will guarantee you that. The conventional methods that we have been using are only 100 to 150 years old. And we have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that they are dysfunctional. They are completely inadequate, unsustainable, and incredibly costly. Let's go back. Let's go back to how they used to do things. Let's use the local resources that we have. Let's use what nature gives us, and let's work alongside nature and optimize the conditions. Ultimately, it's nature that is giving us our crops. It's nature that's making those seeds grow. And when I say nature, I mean God, because nature is just an expression of Him. So are you working with Him? Are you working with nature, or are you working against it? It's a sobering question. So if this inspired you, if you found this beneficial, hit the like button, share it with somebody who cares, somebody who can benefit from this. And in the comments, comment on what you're doing differently, or how you're going to change, or how this has benefited you. I would love to hear your success stories, your stories of hope and inspiration. And if there's any way we can help you here in our company, we would love to help you. We would love to see you take this and run with it and be uber successful to build a farm that is resilient and productive and profitable for you and future generations. Let's bring back the heartbeat of America. God bless you. Thanks for spending the time with me.